Well, listeners and friends, I'm very delighted today to welcome Herman Rutgers, who we've known each other for now a good 15, maybe more years.
Yeah, absolutely. We must be 15 years, absolutely. And you've contributed to so many of the books that we've done for EuropeActive. You've spoken at our events, so yeah, no, we go way back, and we met each other a few weeks ago in New York, so that's recent. Yeah.
Yeah, I always appreciate your insights. And for those who don't know, Herman has an extensive background in the industry. Starting in the early days of tennis with Prince rackets, and then moving up through a huge number of roles as EVP of Life Fitness. Of course, your time at Octane, your time at Ursa, your consultancy business, all that you've done as part of EuropeActive, which has been impressive. I really look forward to chatting with you. And the first thing I wanted to talk about, Herman, was this. I know you all are, this, I got to tell you, this Deloitte EuropeActive research report, I think, is the most robust and relevant document that is produced each year. If you haven't gotten this, go to EuropeActive's website, because no matter where in the world you are, this is incredibly detailed on Europe and trends and the surveys, as you know, Herman. But it's so informative to read this. I mean, I just think it's fantastic work. Tell us how these reports came to be, because they're not easy to do. It takes a lot of work.
It is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Well, let me take you back a little bit. I started in the fitness industry 30 years ago, coming, as you said, from Prince tennis, then going into live fitness, and then from live fitness into some other roles. But I was used in my previous companies to have a lot of data. In the tennis business, we knew exactly how many rackets were in the retail stores, what was in distribution, what was the competition doing. We had a lot of information. Before that, I was in the fast-moving consumer goods with foods, with Quaker Oats. Same thing, Nielsen, Atwood, a lot of data. And I come into the fitness industry, and there was niente, nada, nothing, no information available. So we then started. First, it was with the Ursa European report, which we did with Deloitte when I was working with Ursa. And then when I joined with EuropeActive and set up EuropeActive in Brussels with Harm Tegelaars, another icon in our industry, who's no longer active in the business, but he was very instrumental. We said, we need to have data. If we want to talk to the European Commission, if we want to talk to governments, or want to talk to investors, we need to have data on the market, the size of the market, developments in the market, what are the trends. And we started to do this with Deloitte, with Karsten Hollasch, right from the start. And we've built it over the last 15 years to the report what it is today. And in terms of how we do this, we send out questionnaires to a lot of operators in Europe. We work with the national associations. We work with national research companies in some countries where they do a pretty good job on the local markets. We compile it all. And for the last 3 years, we've done consumer research. We do 12,000 interviews in the 19 countries that we cover, the EU countries mainly, plus Switzerland, the UK, of course, Norway. And we've been able to track what are the trends in the last 3 years from a consumer point of view, not just how many members do we have and who are the key operators, which we describe in detail, but also by market, what is the consumer development? And I think that is so crucial to understand what's the trend in the market, but also trying to take from there, where is it going? What does this mean for the near future? And this report, as you say, is being highly regarded by investors, people who want to invest in the industry. I get a lot of calls from private equity firms, who want to know, what's the lay of the land? How is this market evolving? And that's where this report is so crucial. And Ursa uses the data that we have for their global report as well. So that's the basis for the European content in the global report. So yeah, it's a lot of work. We've just started to prepare the questionnaire for the consumer research, which is taking place in January. And the report making itself and the interviews are taking place in December. Of course, all the big chains, the stock market listed companies, will only provide their data as soon as they can provide them in February usually. and then we all put it all together, printed nicely, and then presented. And you're always there at the European Health and Fitness Forum, which is April 9, by the way, in 2025. And then Carson and I will present again the main findings, and people will then get the report on that date. But I think the data is so important. I still think we're not there. We're doing the European Data Hub. You probably know that.
Yes.
With 4Global, trying to get more data on a more frequent basis. This is once a year. We want to get quarterly data, and that information will be shared only with the participating chains and the participating companies. But data is so crucial, as we all know in today's world. If you want to make good decisions, you need to have good data.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned, I'm sorry, go ahead. Apologies.
No, but we're still working on improving it, and some countries are better than others in gathering data. But we're I think out of being a 10, I think we're around 7.5, 8. We still have a few points to go to improve the overall. Yeah. Thank you for the advertising.
Well, it sits on my desk. I mean, and I really use it. So pardon me for the listeners, because this isn't I'm not getting a commission or anything. I'm just, for those that don't know, you really, and the other thing, Herman, to this point that you mentioned is, and again, I just enjoy the European Health and Fitness Forum so much. I love the annual book that's put out with a theme. I love the way that the whole event is coordinated and delivered. It's really, I think, the top industry event on the planet, personally. And so if you haven't been to FIBO or to that event before, go, because you will learn a lot.
Maybe just intersecting here, Bryan, we had last week our event in Milano, which was the Active Leadership Forum. And we had one session that I was able to moderate with Nick Bishop from Morgan Stanley, of course, Nick Bishop, who's been involved in many PE deals and stock market listings in our industry. And I've asked him to give an overview of, we want to grow the sector. As you know, in EuropeActive, we have the goal of 100 million members by 2030. We had 68 million last year, 23. We ended the year with 68 million members in Europe. And in order to grow to this 100 million by 2030, you need to grow by about 5% per year. Everybody can do the math. Now, and I asked them to say, what do we need to do in order to get there? And how do we finance this? So it was a very interesting session. We had also Juan Del Rio Nieto from Viva Gym in Spain explaining about his recent deal he did from going from one private equity firm to another, one Providence from the US. And we had Martin Zeibold presenting on his recent change from Oaktree to Waterland. And long story short, those guys need research in order to make good decisions, right? And to explain to their investors, how big is this market and how is this market evolving and how has it grown over the last years? So that's where this also plays a big role. Data is key. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So going from that direction, I know you have very much of a global perspective, Herman, but for the listeners that may not have spent as much time in Europe or Asia or the United States for that matter, because I've had the blessing of going to Europe for many decades and looking at the industry, how, without being overly simplistic, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how would you juxtapose? And I know Europe's not one, single pie like the US is. There's different aspects to Europe. But in general, when you look at the competitive market, how would you juxtapose Europe and the territories there to the United States in general as an operator?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, the fitness is an older industry in the US as it is in Europe. Probably if we say in the US, 40, 45 years, this industry has been growing, 50 years probably. And in the US, the penetration today, according to the latest data, is around 23.5%. In Europe, we talk about 8.5% on average. Yeah, so there's a huge difference in fitness penetration in the total population. And as a result, of course, the number of clubs per capita is much, much higher in the US as it is in Europe. I think the big difference is not, the equipment is the same, basically, basically the methods of running a club are not so different. In the US, of course, because of the bigger demographic concentration in the big cities, New York, you have, I would think a big Planet Fitness club has 12,000 members. The average is like 7,000. We don't have that kind of facilities in Europe. We don't have that many. I think probably the biggest ones are the ones in Spain, the GoFit, which is more like a leisure center with tennis courts, swimming. That there you talk about, I think the biggest one is 25,000 members. And you have Lifetime in the US, which are huge, a little bit comparable with a GoFit or a David Lloyd. But I would say the biggest difference is in the acceptance of the industry, the acceptance of the product. The innovation is usually coming from the US. The US is I would say, a little bit further out in the use of technology, not with every operator. I think the Europeans are catching up fast. But I would say that franchising is a bigger deal in the US. I think that's probably one of the differences with Europe, where you have more own clubs. If you take the top chains in Europe, they're wholly owned subsidiaries. Like you have the Ranashala Group, they have all owned clubs. The Basic Fit is all owned. Pure Gym is all owned in Europe. The Gym Group is all owned. And then you have Clever Fit, you have Fitness Park, you have some chains that are large in the franchising sphere. Anytime Fitness, of course, is a significant player in Europe. But I would say the differences between Europe and the US are getting smaller.
Yeah.
I would say the other thing from a supplier, you're of course also a supplier of equipment, as I have been in the past. In Europe, usually the operators choose for one brand. Yeah. In the US, the operators choose more. I take the bicycle from this brand, the treadmill from the other brand. I may have strength from another brand. So there's more of proliferation in terms of choice of equipment from different brands. Whereas in Europe, usually clubs buy from one brand or maybe two. And the other thing I would say different between US and Europe is the financing. It's much easier in the US to find capital, venture capital, and to finance innovation as it is in Europe. In Europe, the ways of financing are a little bit more risk averse. That is the other big difference, of course. The entrepreneurship in the US is much stronger as it is in Europe in general, as a generalization. But getting money to grow your business is easier in the US than it is in Europe. So I would say the differences are getting smaller, but the biggest one is the penetration of fitness. And of course, in Europe, the countries are different. Sweden's 22%, a similar penetration almost to the US, whereas in France, it's 8%. And if you go to Eastern Europe, countries like Romania, Bulgaria, you talk about 3-4%. So there's a huge difference in penetration.
Yeah,
I would say those are my initial reaction to your question on the difference between the US and Europe.
That's very thoughtful. And then to the point that there are fewer differences, and not, we're not going to go too political here, but we did have an election in the United States just the other day. So interesting to hear your thoughts on what I'm seeing as kind of a opposing trends. On the one hand, we have players like Pure Gym buying Blink. We had RSG buying Golds. We have Planet expanding internationally. So that's very much of a globalist view of expansion. But at the same time, we're facing headwinds on geopolitical trade and the talk of tariffs, of other trade barriers that have economic implications to them. So I don't know if we have an answer, you and I, but I've been contemplating these kind of colliding dynamics. What do you think the implications could be when you think of tariffs? I mean, the supply chain leads back to China. And again, I don't want to get into too much politics, but I just think of equipment. I think it as other trade barriers while we're seeing these operators look at the global opportunity. What are your thoughts?
That's a big question, Brian. Of course, Mr. Trump will be in the White House for the next 4 years. If he really executes the plans that he has voiced, if Project 2025 really becomes his playbook for his government, then there's going to be huge tariffs on products coming from China to the US. there's going to be huge tariffs on products from Europe coming to the US, and the European Union will definitely react and build tariffs. It's going to be a trade war, maybe between the US and China and Europe. What does it mean for the fitness industry? Of course, a lot of the product comes either from the US on the one side. You're manufacturing in the US, you're also manufacturing in Asia, I think. Matrix is manufacturing in Asia. Technogym will be less affected because they're manufacturing in Europe. But there will be huge ramifications for the operators who are buying equipment and for the suppliers who source their equipment from various parts in the world. In terms of the impact that will have, it will raise costs. If those tariffs are being put on suppliers, then the cost of landing the goods in Europe will raise, the cost of landing the goods in the US will raise, and this in the end will push up the prices. We'll have a big problem in terms of maintaining the prices for both for equipment as well as the consumer price for membership in Europe or in the US. So I'm sure that in the background, knowing that there was a chance that Mr. Trump would be in the White House again, that the European Union has been thinking about ways and means to handle this. Mr. Trump is a deal maker, so the deals will be made, and if he can then show to the U.S. population, I made this deal. We see goods from China are going to be less, and I'm going to protect the U.S. manufacturing. He may score some bonus points, but it's going to be very, very crucial and very difficult. The other side, of course, is ESG. Bringing goods from Asia to Europe, or bringing goods, crossing the ocean in container ships, is going to cause some CO2 emissions. Now, Mr. Trump is not a big fan of environmental protection or any government interaction there. So that may be less of an issue from a US point of view, but definitely for Europe, there are commitments. There are ESG rules and regulations that operators and suppliers have to reckon with. If anything, Bryan, I've had it easy in the times that I was in the business, with relatively stable times. Yeah. If you're a CEO of any company, whether it's on the operator side in our industry or on the supplier side, you have issues politically that are impacting your decisions. Yep. You have all sorts of regulations coming down the pipeline on ESG from a European regulation perspective. You have, we've just come out of a very difficult period with 2 years of clubs being closed for 6 months for every year in the Corona time, and most companies have now come out of that. But still, yep. the aftermath, all the clubs that were open during Corona had not their normal ingrowth of number of members, of course.
Right.
Suppliers have had issues with spare parts, with getting parts, in time to deliver service. So we've just come out of a very, very difficult period, and 23 was a good year. 24, by the way, if I look at all the numbers that have been published, is a great year for our industry.
Yes. Yes.
Today we had the announcement for Planet Fitness, Smart Fit announced phenomenal numbers. Basic Fit announced phenomenal numbers for the first 9 months of the year. So Technogym announced phenomenal numbers. So all the numbers that we've seen that are publicly traded companies are very good. What next year is going to bring, is I think people need to plan for A, B, and C.
Yes,
what's going to happen, and that will make business planning even more difficult. So I'm not in the hot seat in terms of running a company and being bottom line responsible. I just can, do some advice and maybe help think through some scenarios. But it's definitely anybody running a business in the next couple of years. It's going to be. It was already not easy, but it's going to be even more complicated after the U.S. elections from yesterday.
Yeah.
But my wisdom is not further than that. You need to think through what are the scenarios and how do I deal with that. But back to your question on globalization. Yeah, of course, Raninshala Group buying Gold's Gym, Pure Gym just acquiring Blink. 67 clubs. So Blink in the US. These are all very interesting developments. I think in the end, in our industry, all business is local. Yeah, so you need to adapt. And as you've learned and I've learned in my days, you need to have the right people.
Yes.
And one of my favorite authors is Jim Collins with Good to Great. Get the right people on the bus, right? And then figure out where the bus is going. and who's going to be the driver of the bus. And
Okay.
one thing I've learned in my career is that spend a lot of time with the hiring, making sure you get the right people in your company. And very often, you have a fantastic, let's say a great finance person, but the personality of that finance person doesn't fit the company. So then you have a round peg in a square hole, and it's not going to work. So my philosophy has been spend a lot of time on the hiring, then you spend less time on the firing. And just to tell you an anecdote, people said, you're crazy. For important positions, people reporting to me, I would always have a dinner with my wife, and the wife, if it's a male, the partner of the person I would be hiring on the C-suite level, and have a dinner together and not talk about the business, just talk about life, talk about what's, do they have kids, do they don't, what does their bookshelf look like, sort of, in order to make sure that you have the right person with the right mentality and the right culture to enter your company. And
Good advice.
You've known Olgi Nieto. Unfortunately, he died 2 years ago now. But he was my master in understanding this. He was a great people manager. He was very strong on corporate culture and making sure that the people that are in the company are not all the same people, but have the same drive and the same sort of human values and the same work ethic. And the same integrity ingrained, that you don't have to teach that. That is something you have or you don't have it. And I think that is for me a big lesson. And looking at our industry, and you talked about some of those companies, you see now that the first generation of leaders is stepping out. We saw Pure Gym in the UK, Peter Roberts, who founded the company, and then Humphrey Cobbold coming in, not from the industry, 10 years ago, doing a great job. You see in Planet Fitness in the US, Chris Rondogon, and now Colleen doing, being the CEO, not coming from the fitness industry. So you see a big development in the next generation of leaders. Luckily, we still have Renee Moos in Basic Fit, the founder and CEO. You see some companies, Technogym with Nerio, founder and CEO, still there. So you have now a mix of companies that have the traditional industry leaders and the companies that have now newcomers, and some do well and some don't do so well. So interesting times in terms of leadership in the fitness industry. And you're, of course, in your, what is it now? 1 year, Bryan? You've been in the...
a little more than a year. Yes. So,
no, but all very positive. Thank goodness we're in an industry that's growing. What industry would you rather be in? The car industry, but Volkswagen or BMW or Mercedes?
No.
So we're in a good place with a lot of macro trends putting winds in our sails.
So thanks for those insights. So let's talk briefly about technology. I mentioned the European Health and Fitness Forum, and I've had the great honor of speaking both at the event itself and then in some of the private sessions with the leading executives of Europe, which were always wonderful events. And as you recall, I think it may have been 8 years ago, 9 years ago, whenever it was, I'd have the Google Glass and I would tell people what's going to come with AI and what you're going to see with, and people didn't really believe it. I mean, kind of thought it kind of humorous almost. And now not that I'm always right in everything I see, but you can't help but, and I know your report as well goes into this and the way it breaks down the industry, you can't help but be aware of the impact of technology. And I'm not really sure if people understand how profound it truly is. I shared with you, for example, the brain organoids content when we saw each other in New York. I mean, mind blowing. What are some of the things that you would say in general about technology and your thoughts on its impact?
It has a huge impact. I think that the problem for many operators is to figure out, where do I spend my money on developing? If we know that Google is spending $38 billion on developing AI for their use, and we of course have quite a few companies at various levels of technology. It needs to help to improve your customer experience. It needs to help to make your business better, and it needs to help to grow your industry. You know, we all the wearables, of course, is a big development that is helping consumers to stick with it. Yeah. Of course, we have technology that is helping operators to do a better job. You know, we have predictive analysis on the membership journey of members. All of that is more in the background of the bigger companies that can afford to spend millions of euros or dollars on developing those technologies. But there's also good suppliers that help you with technology that you can use to provide for your customers a better journey. I think the big issue is, Brian, where do we invest, and what is going to be the return in the end? You know, there is a lot of uncertainty, and there is, you know, in terms of running. If you're an operator running your company, there is ERP suppliers. You see a lot of development there too on globalization and mergers and acquisitions, helping on that front. You have suppliers of equipment that help you with like you're doing, like Technogym is doing, like Matrix is doing, helping operators to provide with software and technology to provide a better service to the members. But in terms of the investment, I think the smaller ones can't do it themselves, so they need to, you know, get help from suppliers. The bigger ones will develop things by their own. And in the end, the technology, it shouldn't be technology for the sake of technology. You know, the Google Glass that you showed, was it 5 years ago, never materialized, right?
No.
It was a prototype you showed us. So some things are developed and talking big time. I mean, Elon Musk has been talking about a self-driving car for the last 5 years, right? It still is not happening, and it probably won't happen for the next 5 or 10 years either, but it's being developed and it will work. Will artificial intelligence help to make the experience more personal for the members? I think that is a key thing that where technology really can help to provide a more personal experience that is fit for the target or for the objective that a person has in the clubs. And there is a lot of investment going into that area, absolutely.
Yes.
As our report shows, the various ways of technology that plays a role. The jury is out, and we will see in the next couple of years what's going to materialize. But it will definitely help to enlarge the sector and to make the whole ecosystem a lot more rounded as it is today. So I'm all in favor of it.
Yes, it'll be a very interesting next few years. And I think your observation, a la Jim Conlin's thinking on the flywheel, is technology is an accelerator. It doesn't, you know, it's a tool that you use to help drive your business goals and your operations and all the things that you described. So it's important to keep that in mind, because if you're using it in another way and you're trying to shortcut it, it's usually not a wise decision to do that.
Well, I think if you go back to the Corona days when Peloton would say health clubs are dead, everybody's going to sit at home on a Peloton and a screen and have fun at home. Well, we've seen what happened to Peloton. What was it, $44 billion in stock market value, and they just hired a new CEO, so hopefully he will turn it back to being a software company, a streaming company, rather than a hardware company. But of course, people need the camaraderie. You know, why do people join a health club? You know, at home you have one bike or maybe one treadmill, and that is it. You know, you get bored real quickly. In a health club, you got $1.5 million or euros worth of equipment. You can use a rower, you can use a bike, you can use a treadmill, a Stairmaster, whatever you want to use. It is available. You have strength equipment, dumbbells, selectorized, plate loaded, anything you like, and it's there. You have group exercise. So the variety and the camaraderie in the health club really will continue to draw people into the clubs. That is, by the way, one of the conclusions from the report this year, that we saw a drop in the home fitness usage and a rise again in the health club usage, and that's been going since the Corona again for the last 2 years, going up, and I'm sure it will continue that way.
Yeah, I agree. So final thoughts. I always like to ask folks like you who are so impressive in their accomplishments and insights about their pearls of wisdom. We have a lot of listeners from all over the world in the industry space. I'm outside. And, you know, a person like you with your illustrious career and what you continue to do, What are a couple points that you might share for people for their life and career, given some of the things we talked about? What are some of those pearls of wisdom you might be willing to share with the audience?
Okay, well, we used to say that the 4 P's of marketing, right? The 4 P's:
Right.
place, product, promotion, and
Promotion
price.
and price.
I would add 2 other P's. Based on the one is people.
People,
Again,
yes.
back to get the right people on the bus. And number 6 is profit.
Yes.
And without making a profit, Augie Nieto used to tell me, Herman, profit is freedom. And this goes, when you're a stock market listed company or not, or private equity, if I have to make my budget for next year, I would always sandbag. If I know I can do 100, I would say I could do 90. If I then come in at 100, I'm a hero. If I say, well, I'm stretched and I can't do 100, but I'll say I'll do 110 and I come in at 100, I'm a loser. It's still the 100, but I managed my expectation by saying I could do 90, or I could do, same with my wife. If I tell my wife we're going to be home tonight by 7 and I come home 5 to 7, I'm a hero. If I come home 7:15, I'm a loser. So manage expectations, and profit is freedom. That's one thing. Yeah. And then the other one, it really ties a little bit with that, is under promise, over deliver. That goes in the same vein that if you promise something, you better deliver that something, both in business and in private life. And the other thing, the third thing I would say is work hard, play hard. You can't burn the candle on 2 sides in any situation. Of course, sometimes you have to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, whatever it is, but you have to relax and rest every now and then. Have some fun, work out, play hard, and have some fun with your colleagues and your family regularly is key. And having a sane, let's say, a healthy body and a healthy mind. Is so crucial. So those are just a few observations, as you asked.
Those are great observations, Herman. And for the listeners, we're going to have links to the European Health and Fitness Association where you can buy this, and there are other materials. Please consider going to the European Health and Fitness Forum next year in FIBO, because it's always a great event. And we're also going to have links to Herman on LinkedIn, et cetera, so you can go follow him. Herman, I'm so honored to have you on. Thank you for going out of your way to make time. You've been a huge mentor to me, and I've always learned so much every time I have the chance to visit with you. And I know you do that for many people. So we're very grateful for all that you do.
You're too kind, Bryan. And as long as I can continue to do that, having the fun and helping to make this industry even more successful and to grow the pie further. Happy to do that.
Thank you for doing it. Thank you, Herman.
Thanks, Bryan. Bye-bye.